Earlier in the week, I did a video about true stories that were turned into movies. That was part 1. Here's part 2. Blackwater, 2007. This is a creature feature based on a real-life animal attack in Australia. Through suspenseful storytelling, set in the mangrove swamps of northern Australia, the movie gives a dramatic retelling of a crocodile attack. A British newspaper describes the actual event the movie is based on. It began as a fun day out quad biking in the Australian outback, but it ended in disaster, with one young man killed by a croc and his 2 friends perched all night in a tree while the predator circled below. The Strangers, 2008. Writer-director Brian Bertino says he was inspired to write The Strangers based on a creepy childhood experience where someone came to the door and asked for someone who didn't live there. Later, Brian learned that several homes in his neighborhood were robbed, and he believes he talked to someone who was casing his house. Bertino says the element of the Manson family murders were also the basis of his script, especially the idea of people wanting to murder strangers for no reason. Vacancy, 2008. This movie follows an unhappy couple as they stop at a dilapidated roadside motel in the middle of nowhere. While the story of discovering the motel owner is part of a snuff film ring is totally made up, there is a real story of a motel owner who created crawl spaces in the ceiling above the rooms for him to watch his guests. Famous journalist Gay Talese published a letter from such a motel owner who said he spied on his guests for over 15 years. The Haunting in Connecticut, 2009. Based on the real-life Snedeker haunting in Southington, Connecticut. Ed and Lorraine Warren say the house used to be a mortuary and the former owners were necromaniacs. Carmen Snedeker has told the story of her family's time in a haunted house on the TV show Haunting and Paranormal Witness. However, others say that the Warrens were grifters who made up stories to sell books. Like the real story, the trouble in the movie starts when a family moves into a new home. But pretty much everything in this haunted house movie is fictional. The home's current owners say there is no evidence it was ever used as a mortuary or funeral home, and they haven't experienced anything paranormal at all. In fact, they say the worst thing about the house are the trespassers who try to get close to see ghosts from the movie. A Haunting in Connecticut 2, 2013. A standalone sequel to The Haunting in Connecticut, which is actually about a haunting at the Wyrick House in Ellerslie, Georgia. After moving into a new home in rural Georgia, a girl begins to have visions of the property's gruesome past. Later, they learn their home was once part of the Underground Railroad. Sacrament, 2013. Ty West wrote and directed this found footage movie that is a fictionalized version of a Vice documentary gone wrong. 2 journalists and their photographer friend traveled to do a story on a remote religious cult named Eden Parish. While the film is set in present day, it is based on the Jonestown Massacre in 1978, in which 909 members of the People's Temple Agricultural Project died, along with United States Congressman Leo Ryan, at the direction of the cult leader Jim Jones. Like Jonestown, the major plot point is the cult members' inability to leave Eden Parish, both because of the remoteness of its location and because of pressure from cult leaders. The presence of the journalists drive the paranoid cult leader to initiate a mass suicide by way of drinks mixed with cyanide. and armed men shoot members who refuse to commit suicide. The Conjuring, 2013. Ed and Lorraine Warren were a pair of paranormal investigators who consulted on the Amityville horror case. They also attached themselves to this other real-life case that involved an allegedly haunted old farmhouse in Rhode Island that was occupied by the Perron family. To this day, Lorraine Warren insists the haunting was real. The things that went on there were just so incredibly frightening, it still affects me to talk about it today. Andrea Perron, the oldest of 5 girls, later came forward to say that The Conjuring took some liberties with what actually happened, but that she had personally encountered a demon called Bathsheba. Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position. As it turns out, a woman named Bathsheba Sherman had lived in the house in the mid-1800s. What are the odds? Annabelle, 2014. Following the success of The Conjuring, another movie based on Ed and Lorraine Warren's paranormal investigations was made. In real life, Ed and Lorraine did investigate a haunted doll named Annabelle, and the doll became a famous draw to the couple's now closed occult museum. However, the story told in the Annabelle movie is almost a prequel to the real story of a nursing student and her roommate who were terrorized by the Raggedy Ann doll they named Annabelle, and is also lightly inspired by the Manson family. The Conjuring 2, 2016. This Conjuring film is based on one of the most famous hauntings of all time, the Enfield poltergeist. The Enfield case occurred when a single mother and her 4 children moved into a welfare house in England. 2 of her daughters began experiencing paranormal activity after using a Ouija board in the home. This based on a true story movie is interesting because within the film, disproven aspects of the haunting are addressed with the children's characters saying that the hauntings were real, but that they exaggerated parts of it in order to be taken seriously and receive help. My Friend Dahmer, 2017. This odd autobiographical film is based on a 2012 graphic novel by a cartoonist named John Backdorf, who knew Jeffrey Dahmer in high school and goaded him to perform a series of pranks that were half done in friendship and half done as bullying. It details how Jeffrey's mind fell apart and he lapsed into severe alcoholism after his parents got divorced, and it ends with Jeffrey picking up a hitchhiker and asking him if he wanted to drink a few beers. This wound up being his first real-life murder victim. Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, 2019. This Netflix original tells the story of one of America's most horrific serial killers, Ted Bundy. The film, which was written by Michael Werwey, uses the memoir of Ted Bundy's longtime girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall, as its primary source material. That book is called The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy, and you can buy it on Amazon to give the film more texture on what is dramatized and what is real. It also includes chilling photos of Elizabeth and her daughter's life with Ted. The movie is quite disturbing and does a good job of showing what it would be like to be a young, single mother involved with a predator like Ted Bundy. The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, 2021. This movie is about a famous case the Warrens consulted on, which was the first time someone tried to create a defense based on demonic possession in U.S. history. After the Glatzel family moved into a new house, they began to experience a haunting. During an exorcism, family friend Arne Cheyenne Johnson asked the demon to possess him, rather than the 8-year-old boy who was being afflicted. Months later, Johnson murdered his landlord in a crime he claims not to remember. Things Heard and Seen, 2021. This Netflix original stars Amanda Seyfried as an artist who abandons New York City in the 70s in favor of an idyllic country town so her husband can teach at a local community college. Not only is this script based on a best-selling book, All Things Cease to Appear by Elizabeth Brundage, but that book is also based on a true story. The author wrote it when she, much like Seyfried's character, moved to upstate New York from the city. In her small town, she discovers the story of a former resident named Kathleen Krosneck. Kathleen was a 29-year-old mother who stayed home to care for her 3-year-old while her husband worked to support the family. Her husband said he came home from work one day and discovered an axe buried in his wife's head, meaning their 3-year-old was alone all day with the body. Now, I know this list was a lot shorter than the other one. Please let me know in the comment section if you've seen any of these movies or if you have any requests for maybe a deeper dive into an individual movie or another one I didn't list. See you next time.